Good noon to everyone. I am Tulika Chaudhary from Amity Innovation Incubator. We take immense pride in introducing Amity Innovation Incubator as a comprehensive startup ecosystem in India. We started our operations in 2008 under the aegis of President Dr. Asim Chauhan, with a vision to ensure a comprehensive ecosystem is in place to nurture entrepreneurs and strengthen innovation culture at the grassroots level. We supported by Niti Aayog under their Atal Innovation Mission scheme as an established incubation center, supported by METI Tide 2.0 scheme, and also supported by MSME and DST. During our journey, we've been impact more than 600 ventures and have aided investments in 60 plus ventures through Amity Capital Ventures, our investment vehicle with more than a dozen exits to our credits. We would like to express our gratitude to Atal Innovation Mission and Niti Aayog for providing their continuous support. We have gathered here today for an interesting session on an innovative compensation model for startups. Let me take the opportunity to invite our speaker for today's session, Mr. Avinash Agarwal. He is a serial entrepreneur. His wide experience includes being a partner at Dexter Capital Advisors, COO, and business head at Times Internet, the Times Group, and senior VP at Echo India, a globally pioneering fintech ventures, an operational finance expert who did his BTech from IIT Bombay. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Avinash to deliver the session. Please, sir.
Thank you so much, Tulika, and thank you so much, all of you, for joining this session. Good afternoon, everybody. So, as the Finance Minister is presenting the Union Budget today, let's talk about the budget and cash flow related challenges of startups. Amity, first of all, thank you so much for organizing this session as well, and being such an impactful and successful incubator. The startup ecosystem is extremely grateful to what Amity is doing. So once again, thank you so much for all of you to join in. Also, as the Finance Minister is speaking about presenting the Union Budget today, the budget of the country cannot be spoken about without talking about the innovation happening in the country. We are a country of innovators. We are a country of all of you and all of us put together, right? Every corner, every nook and corner, we have a micro entrepreneur, be it a retailer or be it any other kind of market. So we are a country of inventors, innovators, and entrepreneurs. So a big round of applause to you guys for, as startup entrepreneurs, as founders, for leading the cutting edge of innovation and contributing immensely to the progress of our nation through that. So with that, let me come to the innovative compensation model for startups that I'm here to present. Really excited about presenting this to you. We'll look at the common problems faced by startups and how the Venix platform, which is the innovative compensation model and platform that I'm here to present, helps in solving those challenges, and how that relates to some of our experiences as entrepreneurs in our journeys as well. This is my second venture. I have done other ventures earlier and been part of other ventures, so I'll relate it to my personal experiences, hopefully, and we'll hear from you about what challenges you face, right? And how pay hikes, which is the season for appraisals in the teams, we have to take care of our teams. Without teams, we will not be able to succeed. So we have to succeed with the teams and grow with the teams. So how can we help them grow their careers, their financial, lives as well? So how pay hikes can be done without budgets or in limited budgets, right? So these are the topics that we intend to discuss. And before we actually discuss the common problems faced by startups, let me actually say that, just like an arrow needs to be pulled first for it to go forward with speed and with focus, similarly, we need to understand failures and challenges to be able to really succeed with focus. So before we go to the topic, let me actually ask you, you know this, of course, that maybe 80-90% of startups actually wind up, unfortunately, do not succeed, right? What is the reason for that? What's the biggest, or in your opinion, what's the biggest reason? Let's hear it from you guys in terms of what are the challenges because of which startups have to decide to shut down. And innovation dies. Why does that happen? And then we'll talk about success. So,
mismatch of funds expected and realized.
okay. So in terms of value creation,
Yeah.
right? We expect that will be $1 billion company, but then,
But the expectations are huge, but
Yeah.
the realization is not that.
okay.
That
So that kills the aspiration and
then funds become a challenge.
funds become a challenge, right? We raise funds with very high, expectations for the investors, and then, second round or third round becomes a
Most of the
challenge.
time funds doesn't get raised.
Yeah.
That's again one of the challenges.
Yeah. A lot of startups, most of the startups actually fail before raising the first round.
Before raising the round.
That's right. Okay, so raising capital,
Lack of potential team members.
lack of potential team members, great.
Wrong product market fit.
Wrong product market fit, one of the biggest reasons, right? Yeah. Any other reasons?
Clashes between partners.
Clashes between partners, yeah.
Cash flow management.
Cash flow management,
They
absolutely.
have the money, they don't know how to use it.
Oh yeah. Many startups actually raise a lot of capital, but then fail because they did not manage the money very well, right? Awesome. Okay. Excellent. So that's exactly what kind of this slide says, which is a study done by Crunchbase Insights. Is what are the top? So this lists the top 12 reasons why startups fail. So the empirical data is not very different from what you are saying, right? So, for example, not the right team, not being able to raise enough capital, right? Then disharmony among team or investors, right? So those are the reasons. Now, if you actually bucket them into two key areas, most of them are team-related failures, and a lot of them are finance-related failures, right? So these are the two key pillars. The insight that we've had in our journey is that the two key pillars for making any business successful are the human resources, your team, and the financial resources. How do you acquire them? How do you manage them? How do you motivate them? How do you leverage them? Is extremely important to succeeding. And are also the reasons, so cracks in these two pillars are the reasons why startups fail, is what the data says, as well as what anecdotes are telling us, our own experiences are telling us. So that's what this is about. So that brings us to common problems faced by startups in these two pillars of human resources and financial resources, the two key pillars. So in the human resource pillar, there is always a need to hire and retain quality talent, yeah? And there is always heavy competition for that, right? Also, once the talent comes on board, we need to ensure that they have, they buy into the vision, there is skin in the game, right? They don't work transactionally. कि ठीक है, मुझे मेरी salary मिल रही है, मैं अपना 9 to 5. That's not what startups about, right? So they need to buy into the vision, and for that, it's great if they have some skin in the game financially. And they have some share of success in the future, right? So that's this challenge. How do you ensure this? How do you communicate this vision and the value that you want to create, right, to investors as well as to your team? And how do you de-risk for them, right? We need to ensure that it's not very risky for them, especially for the team. Investors are in the business of risk, but the team is not in the business of risk. That's not their business, right? So how do you de-risk for the team is extremely important problem or challenge. And how do you align them to your business goals, right? Align their incentives, their success, their growth to your business goals. And on the capital side, there's always a need to raise and deploy capital with great prudence and efficiency. And also, if you're profitable already, and many ventures are bootstrapped, they're profitable, which is great. But as they grow, there is a need to maintain and grow those profit margins. And the competition keeps heating up. You create an innovation, then competition comes in, etc. Right? So you need to maintain your margins. We've had the brunt of, for example, Echo India is one venture that, Tulika mentioned about a venture that I was part of. It was such an awesome innovation. It actually created India's and perhaps the world's first mobile wallet for the underprivileged, because they didn't have access to banks or bank branches, just like you and I have. But excellent innovation, but because there was not enough entry barrier, a lot of competition came in. Margins is a big challenge, right? They're continuing to innovate, of course, to solve that challenge. But this becomes a personal experience because of Echo for us. So if these are the challenges, let me actually, we've already heard about these from you, but if you want to add any to the human resource or capital pillars as challenge, I would love to hear your feedback or comments on that. If there's anything that is missing here, if you have faced another challenge related to people or finance pillar, the two key pillars.
I've just recently gone through it,
Yeah.
so I've just launched my MVP.
Okay.
So I'm just making a team out of it, right?
Yeah.
So one of the vendors,
Sorry, what's your good name?
Divyanshu.
Divyanshu. Yeah.
So one of the vendors, it's a subscription-based model actually. So एक vendor जो है हमारे से subscribe कर चुका है, तो he said कि मैं ना अपनी shop बंद कर दूँगा. I have 2 shops, but I want to be on the board for the marketing. मैं job करना चाहता हूँ. So how are you going to compensate me? So
Yes.
उसने company का 8% share ले लिया 5 लाख रुपए देके. That is something else. It's restricted company. Now the problem which right now I'm facing and I'm just discussing कि अब मैं उसको जो 1% अब he's asking for 1% more as a compensation.
Yeah.
And I told him कि अभी तो मैं आपको regular basis पे remunerations नहीं दे सकता. So now what he just said to us is कि give me 1% on my services which I'm providing it to you. So that is the challenge. Means how should I deal with it, because
Got it.
I don't have an answer. 1% share देना आज की value पे.
Got it.
So
That's a great problem, and we'll hopefully, arrive at some solution through our model for that. Okay, great. So compensation is a big challenge, right? And that brings us to the next slide, is that, in fact, the two pillars that we spoke about, which are key pillars for any business, they are actually connected by compensation models. Compensation models intersect between both the pillars. Why? Why do I say that? Is because compensation models impact both the pillars strategically. They impact not only the kind of people who join us and the kind of relationship they have with us, the kind of ownership they feel, the belongingness they feel, right, in the wealth creation that we are going to do, or the kind of transactional relationship they may feel, right? Irrespective, that impacts the human resource pillar. And it also impacts, of course, the capital pillar, how fast we are burning capital, how efficiently we are utilizing capital, right? Like Dhruv mentioned, right? So all those things are also impacted heavily by compensation models. And when I say compensation models, it's not limited to your full-time team, right? Also, your partners, your channel partners, what's the model with them? Your vendors, what's the model with them, right? We constantly, whenever we have to expense anything or budget for anything, we constantly have this challenge, right, don't we? As the founders or CEOs of companies, is that how do I model this such that, it's cash flow efficient for me? That's always a challenge, because it does impact capital pillar very heavily, right? So that's why compensation models, in our learning, in our experience, we found that it was very, very strategically important to look at, right? And that's why we are talking about this whole topic of compensation models. Now, when it comes to compensation models, of course, we have cash and we have equity, right? Cash is a no-brainer. It's excellent, but it becomes a very transactional tool, right? You perform, you take it. All performance incentives today get paid at the end of the performance period, be it month, quarter, or year, right? So there is fixed salary and then there is variable pay. Variable pay gets paid at the end of each performance year or month or quarter. That, we call that as transactional. In our experience, that is transactional, because it doesn't help the company align the team to longer term vision or goal, as well as it doesn't help the employee partake in the future success of the company. Because as startups, we have limitation on how much we can pay them now, even with performance, right? So how will they have a share of success? So cash doesn't help there. And equity is a great tool for that, right? But equity has its own challenge. So we'll talk about equity because cash everybody understands. What are the challenges with equity or stock options? What are the various forms of equity anyways, first of all, right? So there is employee stock options. Have you come across any other equity-based models, like apart from ESOPs? ESOPs, yeah. Sorry?
Yeah.
ESOPs is the most common one. There are some other models as well, like RSUs, which are used by larger companies, like restricted stock units. Then there is stock appreciation, later stage. Then there is stock appreciation rights, which is becoming slowly, which is gaining traction in the startup ecosystem now.
Mostly looking after when
Yeah.
the person gets retired or maybe at that point of time?
No. Stock appreciation rights are relevant much earlier. So it's basically like, you can say, similar to phantom stocks, where you're not giving equity, but you're giving a part of the gain in valuation. So from the person's joining date, let's say to 2 years from now or 3 years from now, whatever is the appreciation, you're giving a share of that. So that's stock appreciation right. It's not a stock, but it's a right to the appreciation in stock value, right? That's another model. So all these various forms of equity and stock options included, the challenges we faced with this model when we tried to sell it to employees in our previous startup journeys is that, first of all, there is complete unpredictability from the employee standpoint. There is complete unpredictability on, first of all, the event of an exit. An exit is when they will be able to share the stock, right? Or the the share procured from the stock option. So that exit is, as per empirical data, less than 10% chance of an exit happening over even a long-term horizon of 8 to 10 years, right? We all have to be in that less than 10% chance, right? That's what we're working towards. But how do we convince the employee that we will be? Especially when we are at an early stage or even at a mid-growth stage, right? Also, when the exit event happens, what will be the value at which it will happen? And at what time it will happen? They're all unknowns. Now, equity is a great tool for investors, I say, because they are able to hedge their risk by investing into tens or hundreds of ventures, right? A team member is not able to do that. And we of course cannot want the team member to do that, right? We want their full-time focus and commitment on our venture. And even if, let's say that's 4 years, that would mean at least 40 years of career to have some chance of creating wealth through equity or through stock options. There's of course public market, but we are talking about private startup ecosystem right now, right? So that's an issue with equity from the employee standpoint. It's not the right instrument for employees, right? So as a result, what happens is everybody wants stock options, everybody wants equity, but nobody wants to take risk for it. Founders are a different animal altogether, you guys, right? And also some risk-taking people, maybe senior leaders, maybe juniors, but they are very risk savvy. But barring you guys aside, founders and risk takers, 80% of the Janta wants stock options on top of cash. That's your experience, right? That's my experience as well. So that's why we are talking about this. There is also premature taxation. That becomes another challenge in stock options. So when the stock options are exercised, the employee has to not only pay the company to buy the shares at a discounted rate, but also pay taxes to the government on the discount that hopefully in the budget, some relaxation on that, which is an industry demand. Hopefully that will come, but that is a challenge. Premature taxation. And the biggest challenge is disparity. Equity is a very precious and exclusive instrument, right? You won't give it to everybody. Should not, right? And therefore, but you want ownership. We want, as business owners, we want every team member to feel belongingness, feel ownership. So how do we build that ownership? Equity is again not the right instrument for that, right? So that creates again disparity between those who have ownership and those who don't. Those who don't, let's say at scale, you're talking about, let's say 50 people, 100 people and beyond. And when 80% people don't have that ownership or that share of wealth in the future, they naturally feel transactional with the company. And that corrupts the startup culture that you had. You know, the bonding, the belongingness that you had. How do you avoid that from happening from early days itself? Right? So that's again a problem with stock options or equity. That is, it doesn't solve for that. And that's why, in spite of being a 100-year-old model, ESOPs were first created more than 100 years ago, somewhere in the US perhaps. In spite of a century-old history of stock options, if you look at all the private sector employees in the world, only a small percentage have some kind of equity in their own companies. So it hasn't scaled because of these reasons. Okay? So therefore we are looking at a solution, but before we arrive at a solution, an innovative compensation model, let's look at what else exists. So cash. Usual bonuses or variable pay, I think we already discussed it, that it becomes transactional because it gets paid at the end of each performance year or quarter or performance month. It promotes transactional behavior like offer shopping, right? It doesn't promote ownership behavior or belongingness behavior, right? Because it doesn't give any share of future wealth, naturally, right? Let's also look at royalty. Royalty is what is royalty? Usually used in IP relationships, intellectual property relationships, right? But it basically gives a share of future wealth. But instead of equity, it is through a share of revenue or share of profit. That's another way to share future wealth. Equity is not the only way, right? So technically there is royalty, which is a share of future revenues or even share of future funding rounds. So future cash flows in general. Cash flow includes funding, revenues, profits. So if you look at royalty in that perspective as a share of future cash flows, it's an intriguing idea because it can have a huge, tangibility aspect to it. Equity gains or gains from equity to the employee depend upon an exit and valuations. Here, it's more, royalty can be more linked to your actual business, revenue, profits, or funding, right? So that way it has a huge potential because it can be more real and less risky for the employee, but then it hasn't scaled. We don't see royalty, anywhere in employee-employer relationships, service provider, service receiver relationships. There is commission. Commission is not royalty. Commission is, you bring me 100 rupees of business, I'll give you 10 rupees. I may be making 1,000 rupees, I'm not giving a share of 1,000 rupees to you. Royalty is a share of 1,000 rupees, not the share of 100 rupees, right? So we don't see royalty almost anywhere except for some IP relationships perhaps, right? Why? Even if it has huge potential, our insight, our experience says that there is, we tried to structure this for employees earlier, but we faced a challenge that there is no structure to define it. How do I define for an engineer, for a salesperson, for a marketing person, even if I want to give a share of future funding round or future revenue, how do I decide that percentage? And if it has to not be transactional, if it has to go beyond the employment period, give a share of future wealth, then how long that future should be? When should it end? Should I give a share of, let's say I want to hire a CTO and I want to give a 4% share of revenue to him or her. So first of all, how do I decide 4%? And then if the person is going to stay with me for 2 years or for 5 years, how do I decide how long more to give that share of revenue? And how do I link it to actual business progression? They're all unknowns today. There is no structure. Nobody has defined that. And there is also another challenge of how do I manage cash flow? If I am taking out 4% from my revenue, I'm reducing my margins, right? So cash flow management becomes another challenge if I want to do that, right? So because of these challenges, it hasn't scaled while it has potential. So that brings us to Venex. What Venex does is actually this, what we are saying is an innovative compensation model is actually taking inspiration from royalty, and it actually structures, automates, and limits royalty, kind of tames royalty so that it can be used at scale, right? So that's what we are doing broadly. Now, how do we do that, and how do we solve for these challenges is what we will talk about. So any questions so far on the problem context? On the problem context or in the landscape of compensation models, any comments, any feedback, any queries so far?
So the guy who is just saying
Yeah,
कि
yeah.
आप मुझे 1% equity दे दोगे and he said कि मुझे अगर उसको 1 साल बाद ही redeem करना है.
Yeah.
So how should I deal with that?
Yeah.
He has given me like, at one hand he's giving me 5 lakh rupees instantly, which
Yeah.
obviously my company is looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And even in the next side वो कह रहा है कि जो 1% आप मुझे मेरे remuneration के behalf पे दोगे वो 1 साल में मैं redeem करना चाहता हूँ. वो मुझे आज ही just cleared it out. So how should I deal with him? How should I?
Sure. So I may have some answers. I may not have all the answers. But let me tell you about the model and see if you find some of those answers here, and tell me at the end of the session and the audience if you find some of the answers there. And for the remaining questions, it also depends upon the risk appetite of the person. So, we won't have all the answers for all the people, but let's see, can we reduce their risk? And even with that reduced risk, if somebody doesn't have an appetite, then maybe they're not meant to partner at a very early stage. What's the stage of your company? How many people you are? What's your
I have a
revenue?
team of 4 people right now.
Okay.
So my CA, I have hired him as a CFO, so I'm pretty sure that even he'll ask for an equity very soon in a week or so. He was just waiting for the budget. I think.
Right.
This guy, he's a VP marketing. We hired him, so he's on the board already. So I have a digital marketing guy who's already working on it. So and the digital and the graphic designer. So obviously he may be fast, but I'm sure.
Great. So just like us, you're a very early stage venture,
Yeah,
right?
very early stage.
So we can reduce the risk through our model for the people who are there as well as who will join. But if they're not willing to take even that much risk, then they're not the right people for you at this stage. Okay, so let's look at how do we solve those challenges and how can we leverage royalty at scale, right? So what we did was, based on our fintech experiences and insights, we created a currency called wealth points. Okay? So this is what we say is an internal recognition currency. Internal recognition currency because it helps you recognize and record people's contributions, your team's contributions to your business. Because if you have to limit how long to pay royalty to them, it has to be based on their contributions right now to the business. Let's say they stay with you for 4 years. In those 4 years, how did they contribute? So first of all, they stayed for 4 years. So their sweat versus somebody who stayed only for 4 months, right? So there has to be relativity on that. So loyalty, right? Sweat and loyalty and performance, right? So during those 4 years, how did they perform? So wealth points helps you through our platform record the contributions that you're receiving from the person. So you're able to award them wealth points as a component of salary as well as rewards. So both, right? So monthly, like salary. So just like they receive cash pay, they also receive wealth points, right? And as rewards. If somebody performs excellent, then you give them an additional reward. Again, you can give some in cash and some in wealth points. Now this becomes a universal currency, as in it's cross-functional. Just like cash, everybody gets it, right? Similarly, wealth points, everybody can get it. Unlike equity, which dilutes your shareholding, is a precious instrument, wealth points does not. So it can be given out in a more inclusive way to bring in belongingness of every person, right? So it's cross-functional, it's cross-hierarchy, junior, senior, office boys, girls, anybody, your feet on street, your customer care executive, whoever is part of the company, because finally, irrespective of their juniority or, their seniority or not, they're all carrying the brand of the company or contributing to the company in some way to create its future. So a salesperson is not only bringing the current revenue, is actually helping build the future of the company. And the customer care executive is definitely carrying the brand of the company. And so is an office boy or girl. When he or she serves the coffee, the belongingness they have impacts the partner's experience or the guest's experience or the client's experience, right? So everybody is in their own way. So you can actually universally reward people with wealth points across functions and across hierarchies. One wealth point is exactly going to yield 1 rupee to the person in future from your future cash flows. So this is limited in conditional royalty, conditional to their performance, conditional to their staying with the company, as in they get wealth points only if they stay with the company. But the conversion is not dependent upon them staying in the company, because even if they've left the company, they receive a share of future wealth, limited by how many wealth points they have earned, right? So it's limited in conditional royalty, and unlike equity where valuation can go up and down, they have that volatility, that risk, which they are not used to. Wealth points, value remains just 1 rupee always. Keep it simple. So this is not like credit card reward points saying, you'll get X% discount. This gives you 1 wealth point to an employee or a partner or a vendor service provider, gives exactly 1 rupee from the future cash flows of the company. It's basically a promise to pay 1 rupee. It's a promissory note to give him 1 rupee or her 1 rupee from your future cash flows. That's what it is, simply. Let's take an example of how this can work for a reward scenario and then for a pay hike scenario. We'll come to the last topic of pay hikes, right? Before we open it for discussions. So let's say somebody, brought in an excellent, account, right, as a customer, and you want to reward this person with 10 lakh rupees of reward. They brought in a 1 crore sale, for example, right, and you want to give, or a 10 crore sale, and you want to reward with 10 lakh rupees. So that's your benchmark reward in cash. What you do is, if you're a customer of Venex platform, if you're using this compensation model, then instead of communicating this value to the person, you communicate this to the Venex platform first. The platform converts it into 2 components. Cash component, which is lesser than the benchmark, and the wealth points component, which is in lieu of the cash. So there is a 3 lakh gap here. The platform converts this 3 lakh gap into a multiple, a fixed multiple. In this case, it's a 3x multiple. Now, whether it's 2x or 3x or 4x or 5x depends upon your growth curve, right? If you're on a very high growth journey, it can even be, 7x or 10x, because you need that much, I would say, horsepower in terms of their passion, their commitment, 24/7 to actually make that growth happen, right? So you give them a high multiple, or the platform recommends a high multiple if you're a very high growth company. If you're a slow growth company, then you cannot afford a high multiple. Your cash flows will not. So platform recommends the right multiple based on your cash flows. So thereby solving that second challenge that we spoke about. So the cash flow management challenge is addressed by the platform consuming your financials and recommending the right multiples for your entire team or for segments of the team. Okay. So now, from the employee's perspective or the partner's perspective, they're getting a 16 lakh commitment. 7 lakh they get right away in cash minus taxes. 9 lakh they get in their wealth account as wealth points. What is 9 lakhs? It's a promise to pay 9 lakh rupees from the future. It's a conditional promise because it is conditional and contingent to the future. What that means is there is a risk involved. What is the risk involved? God forbid if the company goes, let's say, winds up in 2 years. And if this promise was for, let's say, over the next 4 years, tentatively, then in those 2 years, whatever revenue share happened, or revenue happened, they got a share of that. Or a funding happened, they got a share of that. But that could mean maybe only out of 9 lakh, they only got 2 lakh. The remaining 7 lakh were pending when the company was winding up. God forbid, at that time. So those 7 lakh will not have any value. I mean, will not be paid in the form of cash, right? So that's a risk they do carry. But it's a lesser risk compared to stock options where the entire value will go down the drain. And the risk is also limited and the reward is also limited. In stock options, they can have a 100x return, but here it's a 3x return. But it's a 3x healthy return over the next 2 to 4 years of your journey, which is like a 200% ROI. How many of you, let's say, invest or have invested in the stock market? Just a show of hands. Yeah? Yeah? Great. So we have like 5-6 people here who have invested in stock markets, right? What's the average CAGR we get in the stock market? 12% CAGR. That's the ROI annually that we get, 12-15%. Yeah. If you're playing really well, then maybe 20%, right? Over a long term, that's extremely tough to get 20%, but yes, let's consider 20%. What we are talking about here in this example is a 200% gain in 3 years, not in 1 year, right? If you meet your projections, if you meet your own realistic financial projections as a company, they would have earned 3x in just 3 years. That's a very lucrative, promise to them. But it's contingent to your future cash flows. So what they do is they get this 9 lakh gets paid to them as a percentage of revenue or funding or profit. You may configure saying, is it percentage of revenue or funding or profit? For early stage companies, we don't recommend profit. We recommend funding and revenue. Those are the 2 key sources of cash for you, right? So as a percentage of those 2 key sources of cash, they get 9 lakh until all the wealth points are converted to cash. So every month, whatever is the revenue happening, 0.01%. Now this is an example. The platform will recommend the right percentage, thereby solving the first challenge that we saw on the royalty slide, that how do you determine the right percentage? So the platform consumes your financials, consumes your pay package details for that person or commission related details for a partner, and recommends the right percentage based on what is possible, what is feasible, and creates a pool also for the company, saying it's a 4%, just like there's an ESOP pool of 8% or 15%, right? That is created and carved out for team for human resources. Similarly, our platform recommends carving out a pool, saying 4% of revenue and 2% of funding, for example, right? It all depends upon your financials, right? So basis that, it recommends that particular percentage to the person, and this gets paid over the period of next, let's say, 3 years, until all the 9 lakh wealth points get paid out or get converted to cash. Now, what happens if you don't meet your projections? If, let's say, you don't meet your projections and you're growing slower than projections, then automatically, instead of 3 years, in this case about 36 months, it may take 48 months or 60 months for the conversion to happen. Because the percentage is fixed. The numerator is fixed, but the denominator is going slower, right? Or your funding is getting delayed. So the plan will automatically stretch out. Automatically, so we call it auto-elastic, right? So there is no further communication needed. They are already told about this risk, that if the company does not meet projections, it will get stretched out. But it will get converted. As long as you're a going concern, as long as your company does not wind up, as long as it's a going concern, they will receive that cash sooner or later. But now they're aligned to saying, okay, how can I receive it sooner? If we all work together as the team of the company, can we ensure that that wealth creation happens for all of us sooner? And we know exactly how much wealth creation is going to happen, right? So they feel, first of all, recognized that, okay, my effort, my performance is being recognized in terms of not at 10 lakh, but at 16 lakh. But at the same time, to get that money, I need to work towards ensuring the company succeeds faster than plan. If it's faster than plan, then it can expedite automatically in 2 years. Right? So that's any queries on the core model, because this slide is extremely important from the model perspective, the compensation model perspective. Rest is then you can build up on this. If you don't understand this slide, you won't understand anything.
So how do you build up these wealth points?
Um,
How does a company build up these wealth points?
So company issues wealth points
Right.
based on platform's recommendation, right? So platform, you communicated this number to the platform. The platform converted it into these two components based on your cash flows. Based on your financials, the history, and mostly based on your projections. Now, the platform also mentioned this percentage along with this. Now, you're giving this reward right now. So you give 7 lakh rupees minus taxes in the bank account as the cash reward. And you give or issue 9 lakh wealth points on the platform, on the Venix platform. So they can see this in their dashboard, by the way, that I got 9 lakh wealth points. If you want to socialize this in your team saying, hey, X person got 9 lakh wealth points, or X number of wealth points, if you don't want to disclose the actual number, you can still say that somebody got a reward in the form of wealth points. So the platform helps you socialize it through a feed, through a leaderboard, those aspects also. So basically it's a virtual currency issued in the form of wealth points. It doesn't have any value right now. Important point to note is when you issue 9 lakh wealth points, there is no financial value to it at this point. It will accrue financial value as your future cash flows progress. So as you keep building your revenues further or your funding rounds happen, the wealth points will keep accruing value, and to that extent, they will get paid. So accrual and payout are happening back to back every month. Wealth points don't have any financial. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so this gets paid out every month or every year, these points?
No, not the points. The points are issued all in once in this case. In this example, all 9 lakh wealth points are issued all at once because it's a one-time reward. Right? But the accrual of value happens on a monthly basis until all 9 lakh wealth points have accrued that much value. Yeah?
And for this 9 lakh
Yeah.
wealth points, do company has to provide that amount into the bank account of Venix or?
No. Great question. No, absolutely. Because the wealth points don't hold any financial value right now. And they are automatically funded by your own cash flows in the future, your revenues and funding. Therefore, you don't need to budget for it right away. That brings us to the budget question. You're amplifying your budget while saving. So your budget is increasing by 6 lakh, but you're saving 3 lakh. That sounds like magic, but that's what it is. Because these 9 lakhs are funded automatically by your future cash flows, and to that extent, the risk is communicated to your team member. That if your future cash flows don't happen, they don't receive anything. Or if they happen slower, they receive it slower. If you wind up in 6 months, God forbid, they receive only till those 6 months of revenue. After that, nothing more. Right? To that extent, there is some risk for the employee. Does that answer your question? So how do you budget for this? You don't budget for this, but in your books, how do you disclose this liability? In your balance sheet, how do you disclose this? So balance sheet has current liability, long-term liability. This is neither a current liability nor a long-term liability. Nor is it provisioned in P&L as an expense. There is a provision for contingent liability in notes to account. So in balance sheet, there are notes to account. There's main accounts and there is notes to accounts. In the notes to account, there is a provision for contingent liability. Contingent means conditional. It's a conditional liability based on a future event. That's where this gets recorded. We help you with that process. And that's how you disclose it to your shareholders, your stakeholders.
What it essentially means that we are rather not going into that ESOPs route, we are following this route and our equity is also safeguarded.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And don't safeguard equity for from the people who deserve it, right? I mean, it is an excellent instrument of team ownership. Use it as well. But if wherever you can't use equity, then WealthPoint is the answer, right? And wherever you are using equity, we will tell you how WealthPoints can actually become a wrapper on equity to make that also less risky. So underlying model can be still equity, but the buybacks can be structured using this. How many of you have heard about buybacks of stock options? Buybacks, right? We'll talk about it in more detail later, but they can be structured using this so that the employee has a visibility from day one, from the offer stage itself, not even the joining date, but at the offer date. They know how buybacks will happen, what are the rules, what are the conditions around buybacks. And you also know how is your cash flow from buybacks going to happen. Your CFO, your investors know that from day one, rather than it happening as an event later. So it's a win-win-win for everybody, right? That we will talk about in more detail later. So any more questions on this slide? Taxation, I haven't heard the taxation question, it's the budget day. How, yeah, anybody wants to volunteer that question?
So the long-term benefit part
Yeah.
will be one of the things under taxation. But I think
Will be a part of a salary.
contingent liability part which you have just told us,
Yeah.
that taxation part will come under that regime.
Yeah, so first of all, when the employee gets these wealth points and cash, how much, on which amounts he will have to pay tax on this definitely. There is no doubt about this, right? What about this? When you issue the wealth points right now, when you give the reward, will the employee have to pay tax on this?
No.
Great. Because
It will be redeemed after.
it will be redeemed after.
Realize later.
Yes, and also because it doesn't hold any financial value right now.
Yes.
It cannot be traded, it cannot be sold,
Yes.
it cannot be transferred, right? Stock options also give value in the future. Redemption happens, as in exit happens in the future, but they're taxed at the time when you get the share, when the employee gets the share, as in when they exercise the option to actually get a share. Why? Because the share has a value today, and there is a fair market value, FMV, right? Therefore, they are taxed at that time, but wealth points are not having a fair market value. There is no financial value to it, and that is written in the contract with the employee. Okay, so great. So there is no tax right now here, so it's tax efficient. Compared to even external investments, so let's say if the employee was self-contributing, so in the platform there is also a feature to self-contribute, to encourage skin in the game, saying, okay, you got 7 lakh and 9 lakh, and do you want to reduce this further as an employee? So let's say you set your boundaries, the employee says, yeah, I'm okay with 6 lakh right now, my need is sufficed, I mean, it suffices my need. Does that give me 3 lakh more if I reduce 1 lakh? You say yes, the platform says yes. So in the platform they can see that the total becomes 18 lakh, 6 lakh plus 12 lakh. That encourages them to actually have skin in the game and also reduce their tax liability right now in a legal way, right? So they pay tax only on the 6 lakh, and the 12 lakh, as it keeps accruing value, they keep paying taxes on it. So what happens is that 1 lakh that they saved here, I mean they got lesser, sorry, but the tax they saved, that also is getting kind of reinvested in your company, right? And why they don't have to pay tax on that 1 lakh is because they did not get 7 lakh in the bank account and then they are investing in the company. It's not that. They are actually reducing that from their future pay. And that's why it is not taxed right now. Clear? Yeah. So multiple advantages, right? So from the employee perspective, one last thing I would say is that the risk is contained. Unlike stock options, the timeline. So what were the 3 risks in equity? The event of an exit, first of all, or buyback. The timeline of that event and the value of that event. 3 dimensions. So probability of the event, the timeline of the event, and the actual value of that event, right? Now here, the probability of event it's all linked to future cash flows. There is some risk to that event happening, but that risk is much lesser than an exit event happening. Much, much lesser than an exit event happening. So many ventures do revenues and profits, but don't have an exit, right? So much lesser risk on probability dimension. Timeline dimension, there is some risk because it's auto-elastic, but it's well-defined. It's not jab hoga tab. It is clearly defined, right? And the value, risk is completely eliminated because the value gain is prefixed. So it's not 0x to 100x. It's 3x or 4x, whatever is the multiple for you. So all the three risks are lowered or eliminated for the employee. And what happens when you reduce risk for the person who's having to take a bet? What happens when you reduce their risk? Yeah? So his probability to accept an offer becomes higher. His probability to take a lower cash in the offer becomes higher. And the platform helps him simulate or helps her simulate that if he or she reduces the cash component himself or herself, what will that mean in terms of actual wealth creation for the person? Yeah? So all we are doing through this model is reducing your employee's risk for you or for taking bet on you or your company, right? Thereby helping you build a solid team with skin in the game. Not just for equity holders in your team, but inclusively for everybody in the team, including, as I said, feet on street, customer care executives, office boys, girls, anybody, right? And service providers, vendors. You can't always give equity to them, right? So now let's take an example of pay hikes or hiring. Important example coming to our topic of come March when we have to, let's say, do pay hikes and we have lesser budgets. There is always investor pressure that your budget is limited or whatever, right? Board pressure, whatever it is, right? Or your own business realities are saying that, no, I cannot do more than 15% pay hike or 10%, not even 15, let's say 10%, whatever, right? But the market is giving maybe a 50% pay hike if they go out. So how do I bridge that gap? So there is an annual pay package, and similar thing is applicable to hiring. Let's say you're hiring somebody and market is giving a 50% hike on their pay, current pay, and you want to budget only for 15%. Also for very cash flow efficient companies who have cash, for them also, giving a 50% hike to match another offer is not always the right solution. Because then it's still very transactional, the person jumps for another better offer. So how do you get skin in the game? It's not only about saving cash, it's about getting skin in the game as well, right? So let's take that example. Either pay hike or hiring, current pay package is, let's say, 25 plus 5. It can be any numbers, these are all sample numbers, right? These are all example numbers. So 25 lakh fixed, 5 lakh variable per annum. The competition, let's say, is 45. Either it's competition or it's your benchmark. Saying, okay, my gut feel is that this person is saying 45 and he deserves it, right? So that's your benchmark, internal benchmark, or it can be an external offer, whatever. So it's 35 lakh fixed, 10 lakh variable, let's say that's the offer. Now this is your competition, right? And you want to give lesser. So why will the person join for lesser? Unless he's one of those less than 10% people who are risk-taking people, right? What if he is or she is one of the 90%? So what do you do for them, right? So you tell the platform, so you don't communicate this number or this number right away to the person. You communicate these numbers to the platform. Oh, I have the pointer. Hold on. Sorry. Where is it? This one, right? Left, okay.
I think probably not working with the TV.
It's not working with the TV, okay. No worries, that's okay. So, okay, sorry for that digression, but yeah, you don't communicate these numbers to the person or these numbers to the person right away. You communicate these numbers to the platform. The platform converts it into this automatically, right? Where it has reduced the cash component because you've given some budget. You can give some budget. If you don't, then it will anyway choose some budget automatically, which is somewhere between the two, right? Or you can say my budget is just 25 only. I can't give more than that. Or my budget is lesser than 25, whatever, right? So you can communicate the budget, whatever is actually your budget. That and the remaining components are auto-calculated. The total becomes, you know the logic for this from the previous slide. These are wealth points, fixed wealth points and variable wealth points. So just like there is fixed cash and variable cash, there is fixed wealth points and variable wealth points. So what happens is these, and both put together, there is a percentage assigned, percentage of revenue or percentage of funding, or a combination. It can even be a combination like 0.1% of revenue and 0.01% of funding. The platform has that feature. Okay, so now how does this work? The fixed wealth points and variable wealth points. Every month, just like they get 30 lakh divided by 12 minus taxes and deductions in their bank account as cash, they get 15 lakh divided by 12 as wealth points in their wealth account powered by the Venex platform, on the Venex platform, right? So 1.25 lakh per month. Those many wealth points will be added in the wealth account automatically once they have accepted this offer, once this offer is final. So every month of employment, they'll keep receiving this along with salary. At the end of the year or quarter, whenever you're doing your variable calculation, so suppose you're giving 90% of this, you can give 90% of this. It can be more complicated, but I'm taking a simple example. So that much, and this example is showing 100%. So 15 plus 9, in month 12, the person got 9 lakh wealth points, a total of 24 lakh wealth points. Right? Now this is 1 year of issuance of wealth points. It's still not accruing financial value. Accrual of financial value is shown through this green line, just like in the previous slide. It's a function of your revenue or funding. Let's say there is no funding round in this example, it's only revenue 0.1% of funding, sorry, 0.1% of revenue. So every month, whatever is the revenue happening, that much is getting accrued. Till when it will accrue? So let's say the person after 12 months has even left the company, which can happen even with stock options, that they vest for 1 year and then leave. But if they exercise those stock options, then those shares become an asset that remains with the person for until the exit happens. And if you, as a company, issue any dividends or a share of value during M&A, then they receive that value even if they have left the company. Right? So you're sharing future wealth. Much like that, it's like vesting of wealth points. They vested these many wealth points in 12 months, and then even if they move on, they will continue to receive this until all the wealth points are converted. And that's why this balance of wealth points will keep reducing until it becomes zero. And after that, there is no liability of the company to pay any royalty further, right? Or like royalty like cash out further. So it's a limited liability in that sense, and limited in a scientific way using this currency of wealth points. Is this clear? Yeah? And this dashboard is available to the person during employment as well as after employment. They have a clear visibility to how the wealth points will convert. So the projected cash out is also shown to them. And there are transparency levels. You can set a high, medium, or low transparency for the entire team, or for specific individuals or specific hierarchy levels, etc. So, transparency is managed, but, at your stage that doesn't, at most of your stage, it doesn't matter, as in, it should be highly transparent to build that belongingness, to build that ownership, right? So this is therefore available to them anytime that they want to see. And every month as you issue more wealth points, the platform automatically issues those wealth points once the offer is closed, and they keep receiving those updates saying, okay, you got so many wealth points. Yeah. What's your good name?
Sushant.
Sushant.
How do you, how does Venex make out?
I'll explain. That's a good question. Thanks. I'll park that question for now.
Sure.
Another question I want to want to receive is how do you budget for this, right? You're giving an upside. Fine, it's funded by my future cash flows. But why should I give that upside? Is it not loss-making for me as a company? Does anybody have that question? Please raise hands.
Yes, I was actually thinking.
Yeah? Okay, great.
Like because it's a lot of, we are promising to pay
Yeah.
like instead of 3.
Yeah.
But then again, that has to be compensated.
Absolutely.
Time, so, which is not less money for the company.
Yes.
Even if it comes out of profit or revenue.
Yes.
So how do we like
Yeah.
take a balance between that?
Right.
Not that we are
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm missing your name. Rahul, right? Yeah. Rahul, absolutely, definitely a very, very valid question. Let's answer this in the next slide. This slide is meant for that, actually. See, conceptually, before we go to that slide, what happens is that this helps you save cash compared to without Venex, right? If you were to hire this person without Venex, you may have to actually give this much. And maybe on top of that, some stock options as well, if this is one of the non-risk taking persons. But you need this person for your growth. So you're paying this much without Venex. With Venex, you're paying only this much, right? Only this much in the short term. So you save real cash. Venex helps you save real cash. This cash is extremely valuable to you right now at this stage to actually accelerate your growth. So let's say if your payroll is 50% of revenue, right? Or at early stage, maybe 200% of revenue, irrespective. Let's say it's 50% of revenue, for example. Next year, revenue is going to grow, but payroll is also going to grow to, let's say, 48% of revenue. Right? Because revenue is growing faster than payroll, hopefully, right? So next year, it's going to be 48% of revenue. With Venex, what happens is it can become, let's say, 42% of revenue. But on top of that, you're giving 2% more. On top of that, you're giving 2% more, which is a pool. These are all example numbers. It's 48%, it would have been without Venex. With Venex, it's 42% of revenue, plus another 2%. Why 42%? Because you're reducing cash. Your payroll is now growing, but not growing as fast as it would have without Venex. So your payroll budget is growing with every year or every quarter, but it's not growing as fast as it would have. So you're saving, let's say, X% of revenue from payroll, and you're giving out lesser percent of revenue. Why it's lesser percent of revenue that you are giving out? Is because you're giving out from your future cash flows. Right? So जो 1 साल में देना है, यदि वो 4 साल में देना होगा तो percentage कम होगा ना? Right? So you're giving a 2x upside, suppose, but you're leveraging the future cash flows. If currently cash flows are 1, future could mean 20 cumulatively, even just in 4 years. And you're giving, even if you're giving 3, you're still leveraging 6x. That's your leverage in financial terms, right? So because you're leveraging that future cash flow and you're reducing your actual percentage of revenue, your payroll as a total payroll as an actual percentage of revenue, you have more cash available to actually deploy towards your growth engines. Your growth engines could be digital marketing, could be sales commissions, could be even a new hire. Let's say you create budget for that new hire which was not possible earlier. Right? Now this accelerates your growth, and this compounds over the next few years, let's say 3 years, right? Why it compounds? Because the saving is not a one-time booster. It's not a steroid. It's making your operations efficient cash flow wise every month. Every month you're saving this amount. This divided by 12. So therefore, it compounds over a period of time. And that's what this basically says, right? It's a complicated slide. We can explain in more detail maybe in a one-on-one session or in smaller groups. But what it's basically saying is that you're saving cash, you're accelerating growth in revenue, and that compounds over the next 3 years. This additional area between the 2 lines of revenue, the blue lines, the solid blue line and the dotted blue line, this is your additional revenue enabled because of this model, and that is paying for the upside you're giving. And the platform dynamically computes all that, not just at the beginning of deploying Venix, but at each performance year. So every year, or perhaps every quarter, depending upon your actual financials compared to your projected financials, the platform recommends the right multiple. If you're growing faster, then it will recommend a higher multiple. Instead of 3x, it can recommend a 4x, 5x, because you need to attract talent. Fast, fast, fast. You're growing fast. Right? Or if you're not growing as fast, then it will say, hey, sorry, you were doing 3x last year, but now you can afford only 2x. The platform will say that. So it will always ensure that the upside multiple that you're giving to employee, therefore the extra cash burn that you will have in the future, is less than the actual gain in revenue that you will have, or gain in profit that you will have. So what that means is that you're saving cash not only in the short term, but also in the long term. Rahul, does that answer your question at least somewhat?
I am somewhere, yes.
Yeah? So you're saving right now, and even in the future, compared to without Venix, the dotted lines are without Venix. Your journey without Venix in the future. Compared to that, it's giving you extra cash even in the future. Also, what happens is that with every year of growth, you will keep communicating this to new employees and new pay hikes, etc. So you keep on saving. So saving is not only first year. The saving also will continue. Right now, this model, this example model, shows only if you are saving only in 1 year and paying out over the next 3 years. Like this. Sorry, like this. Where you're, So we are saving only for 1 year and issuing wealth points against those savings. And then you're paying out in the next 3 years. That's the example here. That is the same example here, where you're saving only for 1 year, but after that the savings are stretching because you're slowly reverting back to the old model, right? And in that case, you have this much upside, but if you save this every month, every year, then that makes your whole operations more healthy, more efficient, with skin in the game of every person in the team, including your internal employees and external service providers and partners, and that over a period of time keeps on giving you benefits. You're always looking into the future, leveraging the future cash flow. So even in the third year, while you're paying, you're also leveraging the future cash flows beyond that. So in the third year, you're paying this much. But you have expenses apart from this. And you're again reducing those expenses by leveraging your future cash flows, which are looking even better. So you keep on, it's a virtuous cycle of always leveraging your future cash flows, as long as you're a going concern. Okay? So, Rahul, I can answer this in more detail, because what happens is that it depends upon your financials, right? So we have a custom simulator. So let's say if you are interested in simulating this for your financials, that will the multiple be 1.5x or 5x or whatever it is, and what will that mean for your future cash flows? Without Venix, with Venix, with various scenarios like, what if I meet my projections, what if I don't meet? All that is possible through an automated simulator. So that's when it will get fully answered. But I hope you got the concept. Any more questions of this is most welcome right now, else we'll open it for just one last slide, actually, a case study. So this is a live case study. It's a fintech venture called Missed Call Pay. They have been using it since September 2021 as a paying customer of Venix. And this is the impact they have seen. Before Venix, after Venix. I'll just kind of let you read through this. So in summary, they have grown their team by 42% by hiring tier 1 talent and implemented also a pay hike with 8% savings. on actual real cash savings right now, right? And increased alignment because everybody has clear visibility to their gains and contractual commitments to those gains, conditional to your future cash flows, in a very clear manner through the contract as well as through the dashboards. That builds trust, and they have a third-party platform to show them all this and to manage the whole process. So we follow up, like Nitin, my colleague, is here. He manages, apart from product, manages the operations as well on a monthly basis, where we follow up with the customer saying, hey, let's issue these wealth points, or we have issued. So please have a look. If we have made any mistake, let us know. If there are any unpaid leaves or anything like that, which for startups is not very common, but for larger companies, then please let us know so that we'll deduct those many wealth points before issuing or after issuing as post facto. All of that process is led by a third party that ensures safety and trust for your team and improves gamification through the dashboard. So with that, I do have one last slide. Okay. So this is about summary of value proposition to the companies and employees. So companies, better hiring quality within budgets. You're able to amplify budgets, you're able to hire better quality people. Like in case of Miss Call Pay, they were able to hire tier 1 talent, always, and more effective pay hikes and rewards, right? Because you're beating the competition in their own game. You're saying, okay, you're upping the offer, I can up the offer beyond that as well, but there is some skin in the game. But there is a clear commitment and clear promise to pay that much. That increases team ownership, alignment, and resonance. Why we say resonance? Because if everybody in the team has belongingness, frequencies match, and what happens when frequencies match? There is resonance, right? So we clearly impact resonance in a positive way. Faster growth, because we saw how the growth got accelerated as well, yet with increased profitability or reduced losses. So your cash burn, I didn't speak about cash burn, your cash burn slows down. What that means is your capital runway extends. You have greater time to raise the next round. And you have more time to raise your valuation, raise your revenue before you raise the next round of capital. This reduces the risk we spoke about, the failure, right? One of the biggest reasons was cash. If you have more time to raise the next round, you have lesser chances to fail because of burning out of capital or running out of capital. And even your investors would love it, because if the valuation is greater in the next round compared to without Venex here, if you can raise here, that means at greater valuation. That means it's a lesser dilution for them also, right? So lesser dilution for them, win-win for everybody. So, so that's the reduced losses, and therefore amplified value creation for all value holders or stakeholders. Other benefits, greater mileage from capital, we spoke about, build strong teams and partnerships. Employees, most importantly, everybody feels that they have a share of success. Not just the equity holders, but everybody feels that. And they have an attractive and fixed upside, for example, 2x. At the bare minimum, it will be 2x for a high growth venture like right? It can be definitely better than 2x. And there are consistent cash payouts. It's not like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? It's not कि 4 साल बाद मिलेगा, या 10 साल बाद, या 8 साल बाद, 2 साल बाद. It's not a retention bonus. That's very ad hoc. This is monthly payouts based on your actual cash flows, right? And tax efficient, we discussed it, compared to external investments like mutual funds, SIP, etc. Right? It's more tax efficient because when the employee is investing into an external SIP, they're investing their tax paid dollars. From their bank account, they're investing. Here, they're not investing in the company. They're not investing cash in the company. They're investing sweat. And accepting lower pay from their future payouts. And therefore, they're getting a greater gain from the future cash flows. So this is not, legally, this is not investment. It's sweat, very similar to sweat equity. But it's a very tax efficient way of sweat equity or tax efficient way of rewarding them for the sweat compared to sweat equity itself. Okay, so that is this, and compared to external investments also. And they get an enhanced sense of ownership. They feel more ownership and belongingness, so that makes them happier when they're working with the company. They get some security beyond employment, because even after the employment is over, they get some dividends, or not dividends, but similar to dividends from your future cash flows until all their wealth points have converted. But let's say that period is 1 year after employment. Let's say suppose, they were not able to perform, or they wanted to, explore another career, whatever, right? For that 1 year, or 18 months, or 6 months, whatever that time is, they have some revenues coming in, some payouts coming into them from your company. So that gives them security beyond employment. Transparency, we discussed, personal dashboards. So I think with that, we are done. I'll, just close it with here and open it for queries or comments, feedback, anything.
Any questions for the speaker?
Thanks for patiently listening through as well as interacting, okay? Because I think I saw that everybody was, even if you were contributing through a question or comment, you were contributing through your attention. So I think thank you so much for that.
You addressed all the questions. I could figure out that everyone was, in between asking all the relevant ones, and, they could think of. But for everyone, I just wanted to introduce Avi in a different light. He's been one of the pioneers of all the new, very new products which have been there in the market as such. I know him from Root Guru times, which was one of the initial products which brought in last mile connectivity even before Google Maps. They brought in Root Guru as a product which brought in a last mile connectivity through maps. Then his next stint was with Echo, wherein they brought in, so the OTPs that we use right now, these offline OTPs have not been used earlier. So they brought in financial inclusion by bringing in offline OTPs in one of their products in Echo as such. And Echo was one of the startups which was the first one to be supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for Financial Inclusion in the country as such. And now with Venex, he's tried to disrupt the entire ESOP market in the country, thereby making it easier for startups to incentivize the employees and everybody else in the game. So he's been a pioneer in all the products and all the ventures that he has started off with. So a big round of applause for him. And thank you, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for helping our startups with all your wisdom and introducing to Venex. And this is on behalf of each one of us here at the incubator. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Ojasvi, for your kind words. Ojasvi, has been supporting startup ecosystem since those Root Guru days, and he was supporting us as well with his, excellent advice, mentorship at that time. So it's great to have been associated with Ojasvi and with Amity through that. So thank you so much, Ojasvi and Amity, and thanks to all of you. And compliments and congratulations again for the innovations you're leading. All the very, very best for that. Thank you.
Thank you.